Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is the space and the place where we get down to real issues about real matters that affect your daily lives. Today's guest is Donald Young. He's been a successful business leader as a pharmaceutical marketing executive, living the American dream as it relates to fame and fortune. But he was a very unhappy person. There was something fundamentally missing from his life, and after spending his entire adult life trying to find happiness through the stuff of this world, he finally surrendered his heart to God, to love. Experiencing a spiritual awakening, he completed his soon-to-be published memoir, Finding God in Vegas. What an intriguing title there, Don. He also began sharing his spiritual journey through his website, donaldharoldyoung.com. And as always, we will have a link to that website on our website. He posts daily devotions, short stories, and blog posts that are deeply personal, but universally relatable. He currently lives in Paradise, Las Vegas, with his partner of 15 years and their cat, Harry. Oh, Harry, California. I missed his last name there. He earned a Bachelor of Arts in History, Religion and Philosophy, and a Master of Arts in Theology. He's also a volunteer for the Boy Scouts of America, Las Vegas Area Council, and is a court-appointed special advocate for the 8th District Judicial Court of Nevada. So that's quite an intro. Lots of interesting things to follow up on. But we'll turn the mic over to you, Don, so that you can relate your spiritual journey to the audience, and then I'll ask you a few questions. Mic's
Sure.
all yours.
Okay. Is there any particular place you'd like for me to start?
Well, the beginning is always good. Uh,
Okay.
so from your childhood, as you were growing up, any spiritual background that was inculcated by your parents or your community, and then through the teen years, and then
Sure.
on up till the present.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Chicago. I was born and raised in the suburbs, so I've been a Midwesterner for most of my life. I actually did live in Pittsburgh for a year.
Oh,
I went to the university for graduate school in public and international affairs, so we have that little kind of connection with things. Um, but I had a great childhood. I was adopted, and I was the only one in my family that actually was adopted. So after my parents kind of brought me home, they had a couple kids on their own. So it was a blessing indeed with things. So, I mean, I had a wonderful childhood. I was surrounded by people in church, people in Boy Scouts. I did well in school, kind of like the all American kid, this role model. And then puberty hit. And with that came the realization that I was gay. And that was a big, big struggle, as you can imagine. This is the 1980s. It was a bit of a different time back then. While I would not say I was raised in a conservative household, I was certainly raised in a household that being gay was not something that we knew about or understood in any way whatsoever, besides kind of whatever stereotypes that people had about that. It's also at this time that AIDS was kind of becoming a full-blown crisis on the news. So um, I made a decision, just kind of knowing where things were at and wanting to protect everything that I had worked for so hard as a kid in terms of my reputation. And I decided the best way, like a good Midwesterner, to deal with the problem is to ignore it,
Right.
because then it doesn't exist in my mind with things. So I basically, didn't talk about my sexuality. Everyone just assumed I was straight. Um, and I continued, scouts and everything else. All right. I didn't want to be kicked out of Boy Scouts if they found out I was gay. And I also did a lot of work with church. And it was kind of this weird time because I had this secret that was deep, deep inside of me. Um, but I loved um, working with kids. I did several summers as a youth minister, as a camp counselor. And so there's this weird dichotomy. There's a part of me that was like, I want to serve the church, I want to serve God. Um, I think I'm really good at what I do in terms of youth ministry. But on the other hand, I couldn't reconcile this other part of me in terms of my sexuality. And long story short, though I already wrote this story, um, by the time I was done with college, one of the reasons why I chose graduate school in Pittsburgh was I decided I just couldn't be a minister, especially a youth minister in the 1980s. It was just too, not a road that I wanted to kind of go down. So I thought, all right, well, I will go into teaching or public service, something that else that I think is very noble to do. And it was still kind of around my interest of, um, I love asking the question why. So I thought, great, I can reconcile my professional life with my personal life and kind of go down that road. So I struggled greatly with kind of who I was. And I would say now when I look back on it, kind of, talk about wrestling with God, kind of my first spiritual piece was in Pittsburgh when I was like, okay, I am exactly who God has made me. I don't understand why I am this way. I am. And I have to learn to accept myself and love myself and not do harm to myself and figure out a way to serve the world. So with that, I continued school, but then I also thought, all right, well, I'm going to go back to teaching. I still very much believe in God. And so that's when I went to seminary because I thought, all right, I'm not going to go down the pastoral route, but I'll go down the teaching route. Well, what happened when I moved to Minneapolis, then I moved to Minneapolis at that time. Um, I, let's say in some ways, I made up for all the lost time in terms of trying to figure out dating and romance and love and all that stuff that we do is, well, we especially start as teenagers, right? Trying to figure that stuff out, but we do it all our adult life. So I basically decided, for lack of a better term, being gay full time is my passion now. Like, so it was just like all my friends were gay. Everything that I did was centered around was going out to clubs. I played gay sports leagues. Like I lived in this weird bubble, which was something that I had never kind of done before. So in some ways, I traded one lifestyle for another. Um, but then as I traded that lifestyle, I also drifted further and further away from God and didn't taking care of my spiritual health. And what I mean by taking care of my spiritual health, for me, it's things like it's asking the question why, it's reading, it's writing, it's prayer, it's reflection, it's all the things that we do to tap into our spirit side, which we all, I believe, have. So I did that. I moved back to Chicago, reconciled with my family, and also at that time, that's when I started a career in pharmaceutical marketing, which was just this weird thing because I needed to find a job. I did not get into a PhD program. And at that point, I was so exhausted with school and learning and everything. I just wanted to have fun at that point in my life, in my 20s. Um, So, interestingly enough, I was working at a hospital at that time as a temp, and they had an opening in their continuing education department. And that's kind of how I fell into pharmaceutical marketing. It was not something as a kid I was like, wow, someday I'd like to sell drugs legally. So, anyway, that being said, uh, and I was very successful. But what I noticed is that I had already kind of shut off my spiritual side, but then I kept chasing more stuff in terms of, lifestyle and reputation and flying first class all the time and, staying at the very best hotels and everything. And during this whole time, I realized I am such an unhappy person. Like I was just kind of mean, kind of gruff exterior. I didn't have any pets at that time because I considered animals dirty. I mean, I was just a very unhappy person. So kind of moving things along, I lost my job a few years ago. I was laid off after spending 16 years at this particular huge holding company. And for me, that was devastating. My whole identity about who I was as a person was all centered around my career, around making money, about the perks that it brought, the privileges that it brought. I mean, it was really tough because that was my ego. I like the next day, I'm like the first day where I didn't have anything to do or get on a plane or do anything with things. So I decided, like I've been doing a lot of my life, was a bit of my pattern, was I think if I run from God, I'll be okay. So, the best place to run from God would be going to Vegas, as far as I'm concerned. So we moved to Vegas in 2019. There were other reasons as well for moving to Vegas, but so we moved here, kind of got settled in, took another job within, still supporting pharmaceutical companies in terms of marketing, was laid off from that job as well. And it was kind of at that point where uh, I, I sat down one evening. I was just kind of by myself. I put on my headset. I was listening to Johnny Cash, and I don't know how else to describe that experience except for a spiritual awakening. But it was like my ego was crushed. Everything that I identified with in the world in terms of being a successful business person, in terms of being a son, a husband, a cat daddy, all that stuff, an American, all that stuff didn't seem to matter. Like it just it wasn't who I was. And so as I'm breaking down in tears, I just realized I'm a child of God. I'm loved, I'm accepted, and there's nothing I need to do. I don't need to chase anything. The saying is, his yoke is easy. Well, yeah, because you're exactly who you need to be, and you're loved. There's nothing you need to prove. And so it was at that moment I stopped chasing things. And I've been a much more happier person, but I also realized happiness is kind of subjective. It's a state of mind. But what I did find is peace. And it's this peace that has kind of taken me through to my next kind of phase in life, that no matter what happens in terms of trying to be a writer or anything like that, God is with me, and God will see me through. Um, and I have all this love to share with the world. And I'm also need to leave my heart open to receiving the love that's around me, because love is all around us, whether or not we recognize it or not. So that was a lot of talking for a Midwesterner about himself.
But that's the whole point. This is about your
Exactly.
spiritual journey,
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
there are listeners out there who will identify with at least pieces of it, and
Yeah.
things they've had to confront in their pasts. So we're all on the same journey.
For sure.
Well, okay. I've got a few questions.
Yes, please.
Uh, but let's start way back at the beginning. Okay, you were sort of raised in the church.
Mm-hmm.
So what church, what
Sure.
denomination?
Sure. So I was raised in the UCC, which is a very liberal mainline denomination. Um, and so you would think, well, okay, if you realize you're gay, the UCC was official policy was very inclusive and accepting,
Right.
but policy at this level doesn't mean what the reality is at this level with
Yeah.
things. So, my parents, my whole family, like we have a wonderful relationship. Um, we kind of went through all that. I would say, the hardest part for my parents was not so much that I'm gay, but it was the fact of all the all the lies that were generated,
Yeah.
all the
Sure.
deceitfulness. It is just the opposite of love. I mean,
Yeah.
living a life like that is the opposite of love and authenticity, and those things go together. So again, it kind of came around, but I was, like I said, I was surrounded by people. We went to church every Sunday. I was involved in youth group, camp counseling. I started camp counseling at a very young age. At 14, was kind of my first foray into camp counseling. And I did camp counseling for several summers at UCC camps, Lutheran camps, and then also for the Boy Scouts for a couple of years. So again, all at this time, as I'm doing all this and talking about my faith, I'm hiding this terrible secret inside of me, and at the same time, not allowing my heart to be open to other people. Um, and I think that's when as I started to build walls, I think that's also what strained my relationship with God because I'm building walls around my heart. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not good.
Well, at what age were you when you understood that you were gay?
Sure. I can remember it like it was yesterday, and that's very rare anymore for anything. I was in junior high. I just started seventh grade, and one of my friends that I was with, I realized, oh my gosh, I want to kiss this person. Like I was just somehow, a switch went on, and and as I've said to had conversations with other people, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like I don't think we ever consciously pick ourselves. I mean, it just one day we realize, oh, that person is attractive.
Yeah.
Nature runs its course and does what it's supposed to do in terms of waking us up into adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah. I think part of the equation is that vulnerability
Yeah,
equals love. Like if you can make yourself vulnerable to a person or just allow yourself that exposure, uh, that's a way of showing love. And I understand your parents' reaction
sure.
being against not feeling like you could show that vulnerability to them.
Right,
I
right.
I know as a parent when I think about that, it makes a parent feel like they've been a failure because somehow they haven't gotten the message across to you that they're going to love you no matter what,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
And to your point, Bob, I mean, that is just spot on. That was what really hurt them more than anything else. Is especially, here's this child that they adopted because they wanted to start a family. Like they had like the unconditional love was already there.
Yeah.
It was already there. And even though they didn't know how to process or handle it, it's just they didn't have familiarity with it. Um,
Yeah, because
but yeah,
there's also that feeling, I guess, as parents, if you adopt someone, you have chosen them.
yeah,
It's not like you gave birth to them and you're stuck with them. You you know, you put yourself out there and said, this is somebody that we can give our hearts to.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, I totally understand that from a parental aspect. Yeah, I get it. Okay, so you're with the UCC church at that point. Uh,
Hmm.
you're a camp counselor, uh, and then somehow scouts worked into this. So were you a scout from teen years, or even before that as a Cub Scout? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was my mom was a den mother. My brother, who is 4 years younger than me, so we were kind of near each other, but we were both in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts with things. And so my father, my grandfather were in Boy Scouts as well. My grandfather, who I was on my father's side, was very close to, and can it just I consider him as much of an influence in a lot of ways as my
yeah,
father. He taught me so many things about life. Um, so I ended up becoming an Eagle Scout. I also earned the Order of the Arrow, God and Country Award. Like
mm,
I,
you
this was
went
this
all the way
crazy
up
thing.
there.
I had this reputation and this role model of like a good Christian kid, all American, whatever language you want to use. And it I then spent all my energy and time protecting my reputation when I was a teenager, protecting my reputation because I could not let my secret get out that I was gay.
Yeah.
And it was, yeah,
Well,
it was weird because I
yeah,
loved camp counseling, but then I had this deep, deep unhappiness inside.
yeah. Well, and those years there was an extremely strong stance by the Scouts, an anti-gay
Yes,
stance.
yes,
So you had to take that personally, I imagine.
yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
that was all part
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
Now, my understanding is that stance has changed now. Is that
Yes, yes, that is stance. Not only is that stance has changed, but they allow girls into Boy Scouts.
yeah,
So the only requirement to be in Boy Scouts is that you have to be a theist. You have to believe in God. That's where they kind of draw the line
yeah.
with it. So, but yeah, and that's why I've been able to kind of go back in and volunteer, and it's been good.
Uh, in your bio, you mentioned that you're a court-appointed special advocate.
Yeah,
So typically, that's an advocate for children who can't speak for themselves.
that is
Uh,
correct.
but would you explain how that came about and what kind of a role, what kinds of situations you found yourself engaged in with that?
Sure. So, kind of post my spiritual experience, I'm processing things. I'm writing, I wrote my memoir. I'm writing, started my website. I'm writing about love. And I'm like, I can't just write about love. I have to like do more to create love in the world. And so, and again, I'm not the first one to come up with that concept. So I started looking for volunteer opportunities here in Vegas. The Boy Scouts being one of them, just because of familiarity, and it was as much as I struggled. I mean, I learned so much, and it absolutely made me a better person for sure. But then I came across this other program called CASA, Court Appointed Special Advocate, and what the program is you are an advocate for kids who are in the foster care system. So they are no longer with your parents for whatever reasons. And my job is to um, advocate for that kid in court. So I'm actually appointed by the court to have a voice for this kid. It doesn't kind of supersede the parent, but the parent's already has diminished kind of rights with things. And while there's a caseworker and a social worker and a therapist and all that other stuff, an attorney, I mean, these folks are dealing with tons and tons of kids.
Right.
So my job is just to spend time and help this kid understand that there's hope uh, for the future, that this may not be the end of kind of their situation. Ideally, we always, for us here in the program, we want the family reconciliation to happen first and foremost. That's the policy here in Nevada. It doesn't always happen, but that's really what we're aiming for, because that's usually in the best interest of the child. Um, so what I do is, yeah, I advocate for that kid in court when there's court cases. I spend time with them. Um, I want them to know they have someone in the world that is looking out for them. Um, and it's only about them, especially because they don't have their parents in their life anymore.
Yeah.
So, and it's been an incredibly rewarding experience, heartbreaking at times, but that's life. It's as I think to myself, it's heartbreaking for me. I think to myself, yeah, but I'm not a 12-year-old kid going through this, especially
Right.
thinking
Right.
about the wonderful childhood I had. So, yeah, but again, back to your point, I can't write about love and not do anything about, like,
Yeah.
I have to find ways. And I think that's the other thing, is that if we just find little ways to create love in the world, these little pockets of love for one another, from smiling, acknowledging people, um, to volunteer work, to taking care of yourself and your family and your community. I mean, I think that is really what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked to, I guess, one other court-appointed advocate, and not on a podcast, but just personally
Yeah.
know them, and I found it, I guess, very interesting, and to hear you speak about it as coming from love,
Hmm.
that's the first thing that you think of, rather than, well, these poor kids, they need help. I'm a person who can help. I'll help out. But really, just focus on the love aspect of it. Um, I find that very, very, I don't know, heartwarming, and a different approach. So, for those listeners who might be interested in pursuing that aspect in
Hmm.
their own spiritual lives, or just a lot of spiritual people are just about service, uh, and this is a great service to an important segment of our society. Uh, how would you get involved? How do you, is there a website you can go to for court
Yeah.
appointed
Yeah.
advocates and find out what that's about and where you can volunteer and sign up?
Yeah, there's it's a national program, but it's run at a local level. So either I believe it's every state has it. Most states have a chapter,
Uh,
but it would just be just I would say type in court appointed special advocate into your browser and it should come up, and it's referred to as CASA. In some states, I believe it's also called Gale, and I don't know what the acronyms mean, but it's pretty much the same thing. Bob, you talked about kind of the love. That really is the impetus for kind of me doing that. It's not like, oh, I have to save this person, or just like, it's not about my ego. It really is kind of about giving. And what I found, since I started that work, is just um, my interactions, that person, that child, they help me realize my gratitude, my humility,
Yeah.
and that, and that's so easy to forget in our culture. I mean, we are not a culture about gratitude,
Right.
and we're definitely not about humility. So, which I think those are just consequences of love.
Right. Right. So this is a question that I'm beginning to ask my guests, uh, because as we discover or rediscover our spiritual lives, do you have a specific set of spiritual practices that kind of keep you focused
Mm-hmm.
on what this is all about and focused on love?
Mm-hmm. Um, that's a great question, and yes, because I think it's like anything else, that if you want to develop and grow as a person, like for example, you're learning a new subject, you read about that subject, you spend time getting to know, you talk to other people in that area. I don't think it's that very different, any more different when it comes to spirituality. For me, in terms of my own practices, it's prayer, it's reading, and it's sometimes religious texts and sometimes it's not religious texts, because I believe truth, God is in everything. So I think, you can, I think something like, I don't know, the book The Great Gatsby has truths about the human experience as much as the Bible. I wouldn't say they're the same book, but I think
Yeah.
they lead to truths about the human experience. Um, it's think for me, thinking about things is part of spirituality, reflection, um, and then listening to other kind of spiritual leaders, and to get their point of view and experience. We have, we have so many people have spent, a lot of times we just think that we're the only ones kind of going through this, but so many
Yeah.
people, like all the people that came before us over the last thousands of centuries, this is not a new question, wrestling with who we are, what is the human experience, what is our spirituality. It's not a new question, and so it's all there. There's so many resources and materials there with it. But one of the things that I talk about in memoir is I think we've become a culture that disconnects. We either belittle or don't think there's anything spiritual about us, and I think that's the most, in some ways, anti-human and preposterous stance to take, because whether or not no matter how you define God or spirituality, this idea that we are more than material creatures, it has been around since the beginning of time. It's been with shaman, it's been with cave painters, and clearly it's been with organized religion. So it's not. It's like there's something that the ages, and all the people that have gone before us have something to teach to us, and I think especially in our culture is that you're not just an object, you are a spiritual creature as well.
So in all of these readings and you've got degrees in this area, are there any specific spiritual voices that you read and that you listen to more than others?
um so Richard Rohr is actually one of the
Okay.
ones
Thumbs
that
up on that one.
yeah, I hit, he's so thoughtful, in his reflection and understanding of things.
Yeah.
Totally is another one. Um, I identify, I identify myself as a follower of Jesus. So there's also another group I follow called the Bible Project, which I think is really, for me, it's been very helpful and useful. So, um, but again, I I don't want people to. I really am not about trying to push a particular point of view. I'm just trying to get you on the path of like, you're more than just a material creature. Explore your spirituality,
Yeah.
and I will let God take it from there. Who's much more better qualified at this?
Yeah, that seems to be the case, no matter
Yes.
how hard we take control.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it,
Yes.
it
I
never
I know
works
this
out.
like every day, every hour. Like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, am I supposed to be a pharmaceutical marketing salesman?
Right. Right.
Well, you're
Right.
told no once, but you go back to it anyway. So you're
Yeah.
told no again.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
finally get the message.
I finally get the message. The other thing about, I'm glad you brought up the pharmaceutical marketing thing, because that to me is where, you know, I'm at this point in my life. I'm 57. I'm kind of reinventing myself, trying to follow my passion and not money this time, because I trust God will, as God has always taken care of me. Um, but I've also realized the easiest thing for me would be to go back into pharmaceutical marketing. Um, I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
It's not a judgment of people who are in there. It's just for myself. I realized there's nothing for me satisfying that comes out of that. Um, and I think when I had that spiritual awakening, there were just all these things that were happening in my life. One of them was I, watched Crime of the Century and Dope Sick, and I kind of got more in it, and I just was like, yeah, there's something that's very good about drugs and what they can do, but like anything else, I they've also it's also been abused and pushed and made about money. And for a nation that spends more money than any other country in the world on prescription drugs, we are the unhealthiest, and there's a big disconnect.
Yeah.
And I just cannot. To me, that is not where I want to spend the time and energy that I have here to,
Yeah.
to do it.
So
So,
have you explored alternatives to that culture, that drug culture,
um,
for healing purposes?
right, right. Uh, to be honest, I've not kind of gone there. Uh, it's not that I'm skeptical of it. It's just, in some ways, I feel like I'm a kid again. Like like I see the world in completely different than I did before my awakening,
Uh-huh.
and I'm just trying to figure out where to kind of focus
Yeah.
myself. I was speaking with another podcast host who does a lot with vegan and vegetarianism and holistic diets, and she and I still eat meat, but I'm like, yeah, but now like I ask myself, like, two things. One is I'm very respectful of like not to waste food, and I know that a living creature gave their life for what I'm about to. Like I have that in my mind now, so I treat it with respect.
Uh-huh.
Um, and also like I'm I'm open to those ideas that I think in the past I would not have been open to.
Yeah.
So, but that goes back to humility. Um,
Well, you're talking to a Reiki master here, so
okay.
but I'm not going to push that on you. Uh,
Okay.
so let's get back to this awakening experience, because am I supposed to interpret that as uh, you found God through Johnny Cash, or
Well, I wouldn't be the first person to listen to some guy named John and find my way to God.
yeah,
with things. Um, for whatever reason, it was those particular. So I was listening to Johnny Cash's American Sessions, which was the last series of recordings that he did. Um, I didn't really like country music for a lot of my life because I was a snob, but I've come to really embrace it as well. I think it's a beautiful type of art form. Um, but I also think it's interesting that with Johnny Cash, like he was very religious himself, very spiritual, I would say himself,
Hmm.
but still was very much a man in this world and had his own challenges and problems, which I won't speak for anyone else, but it's certainly something I can relate to. Um, but it was when he was singing, some of his gospel songs. Particularly there was this line like, "Lord, I can't do it all by myself anymore. I need your help. I'm coming to you with a humbled heart." And those were like the triggers. It just was like everything had collapsed in my worldview. So not only did I not have faith in my what I had spent my whole entire adult life doing in terms of profession, I think everything that regardless of what your opinions are, everything that I saw around COVID, that was unprecedented time for everyone to live in. And I think that was a big wake up call for me in terms of I never questioned institutions. I never questioned our government. I never questioned authority. But as I started to kind of pull at that, I was just like, oh wow, there's kind of something not right here. There seems to be a lot about money and power. Um, and so when I go back and look at everything else, I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been involved in all these wars and destruction we're causing. Like my whole faith in the American system that I was raised in just it collapsed on itself as well. Like I said, everything that I believed in this about this world just collapsed for me.
Yeah.
Both political parties, yeah, no. They're what I do know is in the last 40 50 years, doesn't matter who's in power, most people's lives have gotten worse. That is a fact. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think big changes are coming because you're not the only one to come to those realizations.
mm-hmm.
And the COVID times were important times for reflection for many, many people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think we still haven't even unraveled everything in terms of its consequences and what it means. We're very much a culture that just kind of does stuff and then we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah.
I think social media, has great things like this conversation happen, people connect, but it's rewiring us, it's changing our culture. Like, yeah. And I think COVID will be the same thing as well. We don't know what these consequences are going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
But there will be consequences.
So here's a question that I can imagine my audience want an answer to. All right, so you were successful, you made money, you were living well, you found God, you gave all that up. How are you making a living now and and getting by day to day when you've thrown all that out the window?
Thank you for asking that question because it's so um, it is a question that I'm sure most people want to know. So right now, I'm burning through what I have saved for retirement um, with things, and in full kind of candor, I don't know. We have a very nice house here in Vegas. It's a very large house with a pool. I'm not sure how long we'll be here for. Like, we may need to downsize and readjust, kind of the lifestyle because when I purchased and did this, I had a different mindset
Right. Right.
than where I am now in life. Um, but there's but I don't know. It's weird. It doesn't bother me. Like it's I don't I don't need the stuff anymore. And when you realize you don't need all this stuff, like I look around our house and we just have, we fill this closet and that closet and I'm like, but why? Like what
Yeah.
is this you're holding on to, Don?
Yeah.
Um and I do think, I again for myself, I kind of come to the point where when we hold on to a lot of stuff that I don't think that's good energy.
Yeah. So,
And I don't think it's about love. Love is about giving and receiving. It's not holding on to something and being selfish about it.
right. So, you've been in this relationship for over 15 years, and you are a totally different person from when you met this other person, your
Yeah.
partner. So, how has your partner responded to these changes in you, and how has he adjusted to what this strange person is he's now living with, who was nowhere near this person when he first met you?
Yeah. Um, Again, another great question. Um, well, here's the thing is that when you change kind of your point of view on life, when you open your heart to God, you open your heart to everyone around you as well. For us, it's been a positive thing. I would say that we had our our struggles in the past, like a lot of other couples do. Um, but what I've noticed with him is that he also seems to be lighter, a little happier. Like he likes the new Don that he's
Okay.
seeing.
What's
So
not to like? Gee.
that's a good thing with that. But it's there's this thing. It's like you put a grumpy person in a room and it kind of brings down the whole room. Well, if you do the opposite, you put
Yeah.
someone in who's just full of life and wants to share that with people, yeah, it makes a difference. So, we're working it through. Yes, that now that I won't kind of mince words. The economic piece for sure is different, but I don't think he's ever been that about stuff too. I think what he sees is that I'm a much happier person, and I'm pursuing something that I have a passion for,
Right.
as opposed to I don't know, a high blood pressure medication.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, it's very true what you say is that, we're all just made of energy, and you
Mm-hmm.
can walk into a room with the energy that lifts everybody or that brings everybody down. And
Right.
and
Right.
it's usually very palpable. You can tell that about a person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
although we're at quite a distance here, uh, I can feel your energy and
Likewise.
that positive energy. So I feel lifted. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So we are just about at the end of our time here. Uh, and I'm sure you're prepared for this because you've listened to a couple of my podcasts, and you have an idea that I'm going to ask you this question. But this is your time to lead the audience with any words of wisdom that you'd like. Uh, so go for it. It's all yours.
All right. Well, words of wisdom, I'm not sure, but I will be faithful to my experience, and that is, no matter who you are or who you think you are, you're loved. You're a child of God. you're of value and worth. There is nothing that you need to prove to anyone in this world, because you are valuable in yourself, and pursue that. The other thing I would say is that, um, always ask why, not only from a spiritual point of view, but I think that word of why is also what protects us from tyranny in all its awful forms. Um, so always ask why, especially if you're going to give of your time or something to another person or institution or whatever the case is. So it's, you are loved, you are valued, you are who you are as a child of God, and part of that responsibility is asking why, because that's also going to help you find ways to create more love in the world. And honestly, I know with all my being that is our purpose. It is to create love in the world, and it's to love ourselves, love our neighbor, and love and take care of this planet.
And that makes me think of children. You know, they're always in there asking
Yeah,
why, and you know, part of this is just become childlike again.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, exude that love and ask why.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
thank you for your words. And as always, audience, take from this interview what you will, what you're ready to hear, put the rest on a shelf till you're ready to deal with it and pull it back down. And please, if you can, uh, subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on your podcast, your favorite podcast, and if you can, support us on Patreon. And until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.